So good afternoon. Our guest, as you will see on the PowerPoint, is Professor Michelle Toussaint from the University of Nevada. She'll be joining us for a tea after this class. So if you guys would like to discuss more of what she's talking about, you're welcome. You should. And I haven't yet changed the coffee hours, but I will. I just need to find the time that would work. But I'll send you guys a BSpace announcement on it for those of you who have Tuesday, Thursday classes, because I'd like to meet people who don't have different schedules. So let me introduce our speaker. Professor Toussaint is associate professor at the University of Nevada. She is a local girl made good. That's to say, she went to Davis as an undergraduate, and then she was here as a graduate student, and then she got this position. Her first book actually speaks to some of the issues that we've been talking about. It's about women making news, gender, and journalism in modern Britain. So it's about the development of a press and the use of this press for the furtherance, particularly of women's issues. And she's talked about international feminism as it's articulated, as it's grounded in an international feminist press. And she's written in many contexts, in the context of colonial India and others. And now she's just finished a book called Smyrna's Ashes, Britain, Ottoman Empire, and the Birth of the Model East. And Smyrna's Ashes is about the burning of a Greek city, Smyrna, on the Asia Minor, by Turkish forces, while the Allied fleet was offshore, and it was a famous humanitarian and human rights disaster. Now, she's not going to be talking about that today, but she's going to be speaking about part of that, which is about crimes against humanity and the Armenian genocide in the context of the Great War, the First World War, but also in the context of the Bulgarian atrocities and these humanitarian interventions that we've been talking about in the 19th century. So I think that's what you need to know about Michelle. She teaches this subject about the Armenian genocide and about Armenia at the University of Nevada, as well as other courses in European history and women's and gender history. And I'm thrilled that she's here.
If you do have a question can you hear me? Is this right? Yeah? Good? Yeah? No? Not on.
Yes, it's on.
Oh, maybe I'll move it up a little bit. Better? Bit better? Okay. Well, I'm happy to be here too. Thank you for the invitation, Tom, and thank you for giving me a chance to talk about this research. If you do have questions anytime during the lecture, please raise your hand. And if I don't see you, please wave your hands, because you do kind of look. Yeah, it's not always clear when a question is raised. But I will stop and give you a chance to catch up if you have a question about any point of information or what I've been saying. The Armenian genocide holds iconic status in the history of human rights. Labeled the first genocide of the 20th century by scholars and critics, a small but vocal constituency at the same time deny that it ever happened. This schizophrenic treatment of the genocide, I think, has swung to extremes. In France, it's a crime to deny that the genocide happened. Well, in this country, we don't have a national resolution that recognizes it, though many states have passed their own individual resolutions that recognize the genocide. This tension, I think, runs like a scar in the historiography and makes the study of this topic really problematic for scholars, politicians, and, of course, victims. The perennial appearance of the Armenian genocide in the political culture in the West is the evidence of its power. It seems with eerie regularity. A political debate over the genocide emerges, causes a firestorm, and then seems to disappear. The stakes, I think, can be particularly high with the 100th anniversary of the genocide approaching in 2015. I'd like to use as an example the uproar over Nancy Pelosi's support of a genocide resolution in the U.S. Congress in 2007. I think it had as much to do with the belief in righting a wrong as it did with political posturing. The same things threatened to derail Obama during his election campaign until he backed off of his initial support for a genocide resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide of 1915. I think these were familiar stories of well-meaning politicians embracing a cause of the forgotten genocide with hopes of righting a past wrong. This image I have up here is, of course, Nancy Pelosi here on a news program talking about how important it is to recognize the genocide. And then the two images up at the top are by what we would consider deniers of the genocide, saying, "Thank you, Secretary Clinton, for rejecting Armenian claims. Thank you, President Obama, for rejecting Armenian claims." And then here, of course, is a rally, a very a poignant image of a little boy saying, "President Obama, why did you lie to us in terms of supporting a genocide resolution?" Well, what's the politics of all this? Turkey's continued denial, official denial, that a genocide ever happened makes this particularly a hot-button issue in terms of politics. The threat that Turkey will cut off ties with the United States as a strategic ally in the Middle East is usually enough in this country to block the passing of a resolution of genocide, as was the case in 2007. So the genocide itself is a story that was mired in controversy, at least within the last 30 to 40 years. And this lecture today, I think, I'd hope to give you a picture of the genocide itself, but also the contemporary context and how the genocide is sort of contemporary human rights concerned, this sort of idea of first and forgotten. Well, how do we understand human rights and genocide in the context of the Armenian case? This lecture does not engage critics on did the genocide happen, on culpability, on definition. For that topic, if you're interested in that topic, two scholars, Donald Bloxam and Taner Aksam, a Turkish scholar, those guys are, I think, are really quite good on that story. That's not this story today. You'll post some of those, yes. Taner Aksam's book is called The Shameful Act, and Donald Bloxam is called The Great Game of Genocide. This lecture posits that the Armenian genocide happened, and that the denial of the genocide is nothing more than posturing. Rather, what I'm trying to do here is I'd like to understand the representation of the genocide as part of a larger story of contemporary human rights advocacy that started in the mid-19th century. Genocide, as you've been reading, is a crime of the 20th century. But what I'd like you to think about today is how its story belongs to the 19th as well. The West's 19th century, that is. The West's response to the Armenian genocide of 1915 has been mired in an inability to resolve what has become a crisis of representation, recognition, and reconciliation. It's a problem, as Gary Bass, one of the guys you're reading, claims has a very powerful repercussions in how we subsequently treat human rights crises. To stay the hand of vengeance, his phrase, he argues, it's necessary for justice to come in the form of truth and reconciliation through international institutions like war crimes tribunals. Now, liberal democracies like the United States and Great Britain in particular, I think really understand humanitarianism as part of our DNA. It's something that sort of makes us modern. It's a part of a sort of almost national ideological value. And I think really what we can think about is that humanitarian idea has become a real ideology of the West, just as much as other economic ideologies and political ideologies are part of it. I would really like to posit that humanitarianism is an ideology, a Western ideology, at least as it gets configured in the 19th and 20th centuries. I'd like you to think about this notion of a humanitarian nation in terms of the kinds of humanitarian relief that the U.S. has engaged in the not so recent in the recent past. Think of disaster work in Haiti, the Haitian relief after the earthquake, and maybe even we could think about Somalia today. Most people in the United States do not question that, however bad our own economic situation is, and no matter how far away we are from the crisis, that the U.S. has a responsibility to act in a humanitarian fashion. So here we have, of course, the National Guard, we have emergency aid workers, and of course the sort of plea for funds that we got with the Haitian crisis. There are numerous examples of this that span back to the 1800s. We didn't invent this in the last few years. I think the origins in the American case, we'll be talking about the British case as well, really rest in the story of the Armenian genocide itself. The origins of this idea of a humanitarian nation really comes to full force in this country when news of the massacre of Armenian civilians at the hands of the Ottoman government in 1915 comes to bear. And these are examples from an organization called Near East Relief. And this organization, we'll talk about a bit later in lecture, is really at the core of